Many have been the adaptations that tried to bring into the big screen the emotions that the books transmit, with results as incredible as disastrous. But even if it's an excellent version, the reality is that we will never be totally satisfied with this new vision of our favourite books. Some of them are part of our top 10 book-to-movie adaptations that failed miserably. Number 10. The Scarlet Letter, 1995. The Scarlet Letter is a classic American novel that has been studied and praised for many years, while its film version was universally hated by audiences and critics. The movie moves away so drastically from the original plot and adds a terrible and typical Hollywood ending. Even it won the Razzie Award as one of the worst films of the year. Number 9. Queen of the Damned, 2002. After the success of the movie Interview with the Vampire, a high expectation was created for what would be part 2 of this saga. Queen of the Damned seems intentionally created to disappoint the fans. The film seems more an excuse to gather rock stars than an adaptation of one of the most important books of the novelist Anne Rice. That's why it was a total box office failure. Number 8. Eragon, 2006. Although its original version was a bestseller of the New York Times, its film adaptation had a terrible reception by the public and critics. Generic, lifeless, full of clichés, with awful dialogue, and sometimes a little absurd, Eragon is known as one of the films with the worst criticism of 2006. Number 7. The Giver, 2014. This movie made a good attempt to make an adaptation of a book, but when it was on the big screen, it didn't have the response expected by the public. Although it made a faithful representation of the images described in the book, for many critics, the work done by the screenwriters went away from the original plot. Ironically, to the public, it seemed like a bad imitation of the movie Divergent. Number 6. The Spiderwick Chronicles, 2008. What do you think was the mistake that led to the failure of this movie? Many would think in several answers, but to condense the plot of 5 books in a single hour and a half movie was the main reason why The Spiderwick Chronicles became one of the worst movies of the year. Although at first it had a good box office, the critics destroyed it to the point that, to this day, it's still treated as one of the worst films of the decade and will never get a sequel. Number 5. Percy Jackson movies, 2010 to 2013. Although competing with a very important saga as Harry Potter isn't easy, Percy Jackson's films already had, thanks to books, a lot of young fans. When it got to the big screen, there was a huge general disappointment due to the excessive and unnecessary use of visual effects and the little relation that it had with its original version. An empty, loose and poorly structured plot that was part of the failure of these films. Number 4. Beautiful Creatures, 2013. The Cast the Chronicles series and their first book, Beautiful Creatures, had the perfect recipe to be a hit among teenagers and young adults who were fans of the supernatural romance genre. But their film version was a big disappointment to the public. Although it had some charismatic protagonists and a memorable cast, for the fans and critics it was a bad adaptation of the book, with a heavy and boring story that barely regained its original budget of $60 million. Number 3. The Golden Compass, 2007. The literary trilogy, His Dark Materials by Philip Pullman, is considered one of the best modern fantasy sagas. The same cannot be said for his first film adaptation that, despite having a great cast, a good worldwide box office earning, and even some prizes, disappointed all book fans. Its main failure? Make a more familiar film which simplifies the philosophical and religious themes of the original story to get a wider audience around the world. Number 2. Ender's Game, 2013. We can say that compared to the rest of the films on our list, this is one of the films whose failure is not justified. Even when the book fans complained about the changes, the film was an entertaining movie with somewhat lukewarm reception. In this case, it's impossible to know what the reason for its failure was, but we can assume that the controversial homophobic statements of its director had something to do with it. Number 1. City of Bones, 2013. This adaptation of the Cassandra Clare novel was born, developed, and died so quickly that it didn't have a chance to even think about a sequel. This film was blatantly made with the idea of selling to the Twilight fan crowd, with the studio having little to no respect for the original book. Filled with unnecessary special effects and obviously rushed, this film was a total box office failure. Thank you for watching. If you're not already subscribed, go ahead and click that subscribe button. You can also follow us on Twitter and Facebook. We publish content every week for your entertainment. Leave a comment to let us know what you would like to see in our next Top 10.